The fact that it was somebody, obviously a national treasure, somebody getting an enormous wage packet paid for by us, the viewers, because this is the national broadcaster. The fact that he was allowed to keep broadcasting even after the second set of allegations, and then really he's only been suspended now today, it appears, because of the sheer weight of public outrage.
The BBC is facing yet another high-profile crisis this weekend. The corporation have confirmed that a BBC presenter accused of paying a teenager for explicit photographs has been suspended. Director General Tim Davie said the situation was complex. Well, let's speak to Sally Jones now, who is a former BBC presenter. She's spoken about her experiences during the Jimmy Savile affair. Sally, thank you for being with us this evening.
Thanks, Daryl. Yeah, good to be here.
Do you have confidence in the BBC's process when it comes to handling issues like this?
I think in this case, they've shown that they're very slow, very defensive, and pretty dozy. And it sounds almost as though the PR department that should have been handling this is extremely inexperienced and just, has not realized in time the sheer severity of the different allegations being made. And they've been caught absolutely on the back foot when, since the first allegation surfaced as long ago as May, they should really have suspended that presenter at that point. And then, obviously, if they were proved false, no name need be given. He could be back on air. But the fact that it was somebody, obviously a national treasure, somebody getting an enormous wage packet paid for by us, the viewers, because this is the national broadcaster. The fact that he was allowed to keep broadcasting even after the second set of allegations, and then really he's only been suspended now today, it appears, because of the sheer weight of public outrage against the fact that the BBC wouldn't even admit whether or not he'd been suspended. They merely said he wasn't actually booked on air for a few days. I mean, that just shows the extraordinary complacency and the lack of sort of awareness of what a huge story this was.
Is it right that we don't know who this person is, that they remain anonymous?
I think it's totally right at the moment. We've no idea whether these claims are false or not. If they were false allegations, it would wrongly ruin somebody's life and their broadcasting career, as we've seen, for example, in the case of Cliff Richard, who had a lot of allegations, people chasing him in helicopters with cameras. And now, I mean, he has been through an absolute nightmare. And the trouble is that even in false allegations, mud often sticks. So I think it's crucial that this man is not named until it is made, until and if it is absolutely clear that the allegations are substantiated.
And with regards to the BBC and their sort of the swiftness in dealing with this issue, I've just got worth me just bringing you the statement from them. Actually, they said that the BBC takes any allegations seriously. We have a robust internal process in place and proactively deal with such allegations. This is a complex and fast-moving set of circumstances, and the BBC is working as quickly as possible to establish the facts in order to properly inform appropriate next steps. And I wonder if that's a key point there, Sally. They said that it is complex and fast-moving. Do they need to be cut a bit of slack here?
I think the fact that there have been allegations floating around since May shows that it's not that fast-moving, and I wouldn't have said that their processes were that robust if whoever the presenter is has been allowed to keep working on screen, even though these particular claims have been around for 3 months or more. I think that just to cover their backs as belt and braces, they should have taken the step of getting him off air, at least short term, while the investigation goes ahead. And then if it turns out that the allegations aren't correct, he can, of course, go back on air with a clean sheet. But I think they can say it's robust all they like. It manifestly isn't. I remember in the 1980s, the major news presenter that I was working with was actually disgraced after a sting by a Sunday newspaper, which showed up his involvement with cocaine and prostitutes. And this was despite the fact that he very much gave the impression, and had done over decades, of being a really reputable, trustworthy family man. What he'd done was not even illegal, but it was just entirely disreputable, particularly compared to his image. And the moment that he had acknowledged that the actual claims were correct, he was off air so quickly, his feet didn't touch the ground, and he never worked for the BBC again. And the same thing used to happen even with people who just sort of, people had claimed that they'd had affairs with other people, even when it was entirely, they weren't breaking any laws. But the BBC in those days was so proud of its reputation that anybody, who was sort of besmirched with what were considered damaging claims very often didn't work for quite a while. In some cases, they were sacked on the spot, which is what happened with this guy.
Mm. And I mean, Sally, as you say, you've seen these stories play out. Do you feel like the BBC now need to sort of spell everything out? That perhaps they need to show their workings out from May up to today and through this week?
Yes, I think what the BBC should have done the moment the allegations began in May was to assemble all their lawyers, their best comms people, their PR, their spokespeople, um, and also the boss of, or the bosses of whoever the major presenter is, and get an absolutely coordinated response and make everybody realise just how serious these allegations were.
Mm.
And I think that they've also, each one of them has got to remember that every one of their emails since May is likely to be subject to an investigation. They've got to be aware that, they must come together and provide a lot more detail than they have so far, and be aware that there may very well be an extremely thorough investigation, which will go right back to the first reports of those claims.
Sure. Just briefly, Sally, just finally, do you feel that there's perhaps a BBC premium being paid here? I mean, there are a lot of people who are out to get the BBC, a lot of people who are, against the BBC and well within their rights to be so. Do you think this is a big story because it's the BBC?
No, not particularly. I mean, you look at the terrific sort of kickback there was after the Philip Schofield
Mm.
disgracing, where ITV was shown to have behaved in another major broadcaster, shown to have behaved in a similarly sort of rather blind and rather slow to react, and everybody hiding their heads in the sand and claiming nobody had known anything.
Mm.
And of course, the moment they began talking to people who had been working on that show, and actually finding out, getting a kind of trail of blame and who knew what, of course, it became clearer and clearer that, that wasn't going to run. And they came in for no end of flack, just in the way that the BBC already is. I don't think there's really any difference in this instance between the BBC and ITV. So everybody expects a high standard of the BBC because they are the national broadcaster, but so they do of any national broadcaster. And I don't think there's a lot of difference in the reaction there's been. Everybody's furious.
Okay, Sally, nice to talk to you tonight. Thank you very much indeed for your insights. Thank you, Sally. Sally Jones, former BBC presenter, who's spoken of her experiences with Jimmy Savile.